Beneath the frost-bitten silence of Dogwood Parish, something was born that was never meant to walk among men. In 1839, long before the Carroway sisters became legend, there were two brothers, not of flesh, but of shadow. They were not on any census, no baptismal record bore their names, and yet every ledger of death, every misaligned birth, every coffin lowered before its time, bore their mark. Locals would whisper them like curses, Elric and Bram Carroway. Not healers, not men. Something in between. The Carroway brothers were said to arrive before the labor pains began, even before the mother knew she was expecting. They'd come on foot, cloaked in soot-colored coats, bearing bundles of dried nettle, ash root, and cord, knotted with copper wire, always barefoot, always in silence. The moment they entered a house, the clocks would stop, mirrors fogged, milk curdled. Even the dogs refused to bark. And the birth? It always succeeded, but never without cost. One child born beneath their care would never sleep again. Another had a second shadow, and one mother, pale, trembling, breathless, insisted her son came out already whispering, not crying, whispering, in a voice that didn't belong to him. They weren't summoned, they chose. And when the town tried to ask why, the midwife they replaced, a woman named Matilda Grace, was found hanging above her own bed, a scroll of parchment jammed between her teeth. On it, 3 words etched in blood, not just midwives. Some said they were protectors, others said they were collectors, but those who dared to listen longer, those who stayed too near the ridge past dusk, they knew better. Because when the veil grows thin and the body splits open to welcome new life, there are things that slip through, things that should never breathe air. And the Carroway brothers? They weren't midwives to save life. They were sentinels, gatekeepers, midwives to the damned. This is not a story. This is a reckoning, and you're already deeper than you know. They say the first sign isn't blood, it's silence. In the spring of 1840, a family named Wexler lived at the edge of Dogwood Parish. Simple folk, devout. The father, Elias, had carved scripture into his doorframe with his own hands. The mother, Rhea, was heavy with child, her third. One night the fire refused to light. Their oil lamp sputtered out, and from the cradle of darkness outside their window came whistling, low, purposeful, a tune no one recognized, and yet it sank into the bones like memory. By morning, Rhea's belly was flat. No blood, no signs of labor, just her nightgown soaked through with salt water, her skin covered in handprints far too small to be human. She did not speak again. The local priest said she'd been visited by the devil, but Elias, with shaking hands and a face aged 10 years overnight, whispered a different name. Bram. See, Elric was the older brother, all bone and stillness, but Bram was laughter turned inside out. There are accounts from travelers who claim to see a young man, no more than 20, weaving reeds into dolls and placing them in the paths of women near labor. When a doctor approached him once, Bram smiled wide, too wide, and asked, "Do you know what happens when a soul is born wrong side first?" The dolls were always found broken in half the next day, and the women who stepped over them, their children were born blind in one eye, or covered in lanugo that never shed, or worse, born knowing things. A merchant passing through recalled stopping at the edge of the ridge, seeking directions. He knocked on the door of a narrow house with twisted shingles and herbs hanging from iron hooks. Elric opened it, said nothing, just handed the merchant a small cloth bundle tied with horsehair. "Give this to the next newborn you see," he muttered. Inside, a single tooth, human, etched with concentric rings like tree bark. That merchant never delivered it. Instead, he buried it deep beneath a stone fence post. The next morning, the fence was gone. The tooth sat on his pillow. You don't call the Carroway brothers. You encounter them, the way you might a fault line or a burning bush that never stops smoking. And those who think they understand birth as the beginning, they've never been to Dogwood Parish. They've never heard a child speak in a dead woman's voice. And those who think they understand birth as the beginning, they've never been to Dogwood Parish. They've never heard a child speak in a dead woman's voice, because that's what came next. Not legend, but witness. A child named Miriam Toth was born on the coldest night of the year, wrapped in thorns and breathless for nearly 7 minutes. No one expected her to live. The doctor had already closed his satchel when she gasped once, and then, in a tone far too deep, far too calm, whispered the phrase, "The gate is thin." Her mother fainted. Her father fled, and the Carroway brothers, who no one had seen enter, were suddenly standing in the corner of the room, faces half shaded by their hoods, Elric clutching a bundle that bled through linen, Bram gently shushing nothing at all. They said nothing. They simply placed a rust-colored charm beneath the cradle and walked out, but not before Bram whispered, just loud enough to be heard, "She's not the first. She's just the first who remembers." After that, strange things began to coil through the parish like smoke under the floorboards. Chickens laid eggs with no shells. Infants stared into corners for hours without blinking. A farmer's wife claimed her newborn hummed a hymn she hadn't heard since her own mother's funeral, a melody sung in Latin she never taught him. And all the while, whenever someone tried to speak against it, to challenge the source, something intervened. A preacher preparing a sermon against the brothers swallowed a nail in his sleep. A councilman who tried to send for help from the next county found his wagon overturned, wheels spinning with no wind. His horse foamed at the mouth, eyes wide as if staring down something older than hunger. And always, when a new birth approached, the signs came like omens, doors swinging open without wind, hearths roaring to life at midnight, and footsteps pacing iron in the attic, even when the home had no second floor. That's how the town learned to tell. Not by asking, not by inviting, but by listening for the signs, for the absence of sound, and the sudden pressure behind your eyes when the Carroways were near. Because Elric brought the stillness, and Bram brought the change. And once they came for you, you weren't expecting. You were offering. Not life, not joy, something else entirely, something colder, something older. That was the true horror behind the Carroway brothers. They didn't arrive to welcome birth. They arrived to broker it, to strike silent deals with whatever watched from behind the veil. And if you listened close enough, through the walls, beneath the floorboards, you'd swear you could hear something answering them, because labor under their presence wasn't pain. It was negotiation. A woman named Elsbeth Mayer gave birth alone in her root cellar after the town doctor fell ill. She was found days later, smiling, lips torn from the strain. The child was breathing, wide-eyed, healthy by all appearances, but she had no reflection, and in her tiny palm, clenched so tight it broke her fingers, was a single page torn from the book of Matthew. No one could explain how it got there. The priest refused to touch it. The paper hissed when burned. That same week, Elric was seen in the field behind the old parsonage, carving symbols into the frost with the edge of his boot. A hunter tried to approach. He never made it back. His rifle was found bent backward, his belt buckle turned inside out, and beside it, a note scratched in soot on birch bark. Do not name what you invite. But it was already too late for Dogwood. Naming had begun. Children who had not yet spoken were seen mouthing words during thunderstorms, words their parents didn't recognize, but which stirred unease so deep it made men weep. One man, Abel Lark, awoke to find every mirror in his house turned to face his newborn's crib. Every one. When he asked his wife why she'd done it, She only laughed and said, "They said she should see herself come through. Not be born. Come through." That was the shift. That was the moment the town began to fracture. Not from outside threats, but from knowing too much. The kind of knowing that peels your sanity like bark from a tree. The Carroways weren't heralds. They weren't men. They were knots, tied in time, pulling dogwood into something deeper than fate and darker than death. They didn't serve life. They curated entry, and not everything they brought through belonged in this world. And the worst part? They never left empty-handed. Something was always taken, something unseen, something vital. And the cost? It didn't reveal itself in blood or coin, but in change. Quiet, irreversible change. A woman's laugh that never returned after birth. A child who would only draw spirals, hundreds of them, until her fingers blistered. Fathers forgetting their own names when they looked into their sons' eyes. And still, the brothers came. Uninvited. Unstoppable. They didn't knock. They arrived as if summoned by sin, as if the act of creation itself was their domain, not divine, not cursed. Claimed. One bitter winter evening, Bram was seen beneath the bell tower, barefoot in the snow, humming to a bundle held tight against his chest. The deacon swore it was moving, shivering in rhythm with the notes. When asked what he carried, Bram smiled and whispered, "A child who never made it." But something else did. And then he vanished into the dark, leaving behind only a trail of melted footprints that led nowhere. From that point on, no one in Dogwood believed birth was a blessing. Not anymore. It was a ritual, an exchange, a tear in the skin of the world, and the Carroway brothers weren't delivering life, they were managing passage. People stopped baptizing their young, not from lack of faith, but fear that water might not be enough to cleanse what had crossed. And those who questioned it? They began to vanish. First, the record keeper, a young man named Jonas, last seen scribbling the names of every birth tied to the Carroways. His house burned to ash in the dead of night. His ledger survived. But when someone opened it, all the ink had run backward. Then the town's only midwife disappeared. Her satchel was found nailed to the church door with 3 umbilical cords braided tight. No note, just the smell of lavender and something wet. That's when the men of Dogwood started whispering again. No, not in resistance, but resignation. Because somewhere deep in their bones they knew this wasn't their town anymore. It belonged to the ones who could walk between breaths, to the gatekeepers who watched from the cradle and followed the stillborn into the soil. It belonged to Elric and Bram. And the worst births, the ones no one remembered happening, they weren't accidents. They were intentional. And the proof was in the children, the ones who came after, who didn't cry, didn't nurse, didn't blink for days. They simply arrived, fully formed, eerily calm, gazing at the world like they recognized it or remembered it. One such child, born to the widow, Hannah Tilson, was found sitting upright in his crib at just 3 days old, eyes wide, hands folded over a dead sparrow. He hadn't left the room. The windows were shut. The bird had no wounds. Only its eyes were missing, and in their place, packed tightly into the skull, were small white stones arranged like teeth. Hannah didn't scream. She just started praying backward, syllables unraveling like thread. Her neighbors found her walking into the river the next morning, humming lullabies with no tune. But the worst wasn't what came into the world. It was what left it. Every family touched by the Carroways began to lose something, subtle at first. A name no one could recall. A favorite hymn gone from memory. A recipe passed down 3 generations, suddenly unmakeable. Small fractures in the mind, the soul. Until one day, they woke up, and didn't recognize their own blood. A man named Wex Carter swore his daughter had changed overnight. Not grown, not aged, just shifted. Her left hand was suddenly dominant. Her laugh, half a second too slow. And when he confronted her, she looked him in the eye and said, "I'm the right one." The other was too loud. That night, the wind didn't blow, but his curtains moved anyway. And when he opened her bedroom door, her bed was full of feathers. And nothing else. You see, this wasn't about haunting. This was about replacement. The Carroways didn't just oversee births. They curated entries. Who got through? What got through? And what left behind was often still breathing, still walking, still answering to the same name, but emptied, hollowed, host to something ancient, and silence, and curious in sleep. And now the town was learning the difference between being born and being delivered. One was natural, the other was transaction. A child of birth cried. A child of delivery waited, watched, weighed, and always, always called the Carroways uncles, even if no one had ever said the name aloud. That's when it became clear. The Carroway brothers weren't just midwives to the damned. They were custodians of the exchange, and Dogwood Parish was only their first gate. Dogwood Parish was only their first gate. Because as the years slid by like wet pages in a rotting book, the signs began appearing elsewhere, miles away, counties over. Towns that had never heard of Elric or Bram whispered of barefoot men arriving before midnight, bearing cord-wrapped bundles and eyes that didn't reflect firelight. In Bellamore, a newborn was found swaddled in damp muslin, a symbol drawn in milk across its chest. 3 circles, nested, each one broken at a different point. The doctor who attempted to scrub it clean screamed until his tongue split. In Havering, a pregnant woman went into labor with no warning, delivered a child that clutched a wooden spool in its hand, still spinning, though no thread was attached. She died before naming him. Her body shriveled in hours, as though something drained her from within. And in every one of these places, witnesses began to draw the same face, gaunt, hollow, and wide-smiling. Bram. Always Bram. Elric was seen less and less. Some said he had returned beneath the soil. Others believed he became the ridge. The spread wasn't a plague. It was an invitation, a quiet pulling of the thread that separates this world from whatever waits beyond. And those the brothers delivered? They weren't grateful. They were aware. Children with eyes like shuttered lanterns. Toddlers who refused to walk unless the moon was full. One boy in Carrow's End was born with a second heartbeat, not in his chest, but in the base of his skull. He could hear whispers no one else could. When he drew, he scribbled floor plans of buildings that didn't exist, not yet. And through all of this, the Carroway brothers never changed. They aged, but didn't weaken. They appeared where they pleased, untouched by time, unaffected by law. One sheriff tried to question them after a string of deaths. He didn't even reach the gate, fell to his knees 3 paces from their path, bleeding from the eyes. By morning, his badge had turned to ash. His deputy claimed he heard Bram singing from the trees, something that sounded like a lullaby for the blind. No one searched again after that. Because this isn't folklore, it's migration. What started in Dogwood is now a pattern. And if you're watching this, if your breath caught even once, you've already felt them near. You've already felt them near. In the corner of your eye when you wake at 3:11 a.m. for no reason. In the faint humming that doesn't quite match the refrigerator. In the baby monitor that clicks on even when the child is silent. That's how they come now. Not with ritual, not with warning, but with familiarity. You'll smell burning nettle and not know why. You'll find strands of someone else's hair woven into your doormat. You'll hear laughter behind the drywall, soft and polite, like an apology whispered through milk teeth. Because once they've marked a place, time becomes threadbare. Memories unravel, meaning stretches thin, and they slip through, not as ghosts, not as demons, but as inheritance. In one town, a school nurse found a series of identical bruises on the backs of 3 infants, all crescent-shaped, as if kissed by something with no lips. The parents denied everything. One mother wept and said her son had spoken the phrase, "I waited in the dark for you." He was 5 weeks old. In another case, a delivery room camera blinked off for 7 seconds during a cesarean. When it flicked back on, the infant was already swaddled, a finger pressed against its lips in a shushing gesture. The mother died of an embolism minutes later. But in the footage, there was something else, just for a frame. 2 figures in the reflection of the OR window, barefoot, one smiling. Hospitals won't speak of it, nurses are reassigned, records vanish, but it's spreading like roots in dry soil. You think your child's colic is just gas. You think the night terrors are just dreams. But they remember things you don't. They were chosen, delivered, not born. The Carroway brothers never cared for geography, only access. And now, every cradle becomes a door, every newborn a question asked in a language the earth has long forgotten. You want proof? Go find an old mirror, hold it to a child's face, just as they wake. If their reflection arrives before their eyes open, run. Don't gather your things, don't make a sound, just run, because they're already watching, measuring, deciding. This isn't a story. This is selection. And some of you, watching now, were never supposed to survive your birth. Some of you, watching now, were never supposed to survive your birth, but something intervened. A misstep, a favor, a debt collected in breath and bone. You weren't saved. You were smuggled. And deep down, you've always known it. The shadow that never quite matches your shape. The silence that thickens when you speak your full name aloud. The feeling that your life doesn't fully belong to you. It doesn't. It never did. Because when the Carroway brothers let someone slip through the veil who wasn't meant to come, when they stitched flesh onto a soul that hadn't been weighed yet, it creates a fracture, a ripple. And in that rift, something else waits, patient and coiled, for its time to return and complete the trade. You might already feel it. The sense that someone is waiting for you to stumble. Not a person, a force, a hunger wrapped in thread. And when it's time, it won't knock. It'll arrive the way Bram always does, grinning, barefoot, hands behind his back, like a child hiding something sharp. He doesn't take you with violence. He just watches you remember that your first breath wasn't yours, and that the name on your birth certificate is only a placeholder, a temporary costume worn until the true one is spoken. Elric once whispered to a woman mid-labor, "He's not yours, he's just coming through you." That woman died smiling. The child never spoke but stared into mirrors until the glass warped. And when the townsfolk tried to bury him after he vanished from his crib, the soil spat the coffin back out. Empty, with a single bone inside that didn't belong to a child. A rib. Too long, too old, polished, smooth. That's the kind of thing the world buries under polite science and nervous laughter. But the Carroways never needed you to believe. They only needed you not to look too closely, because if you did, you'd see it everywhere. In the genealogy that doesn't trace, in the birthmark that burns during storms, in the lullaby you hum even though no one ever taught it to you. You weren't supposed to make it through, but you did. Now you owe, and they always come back to collect. And they always come back to collect. Not with scythes or shackles, but with silence and symbols. Folded paper birds tucked beneath your pillow. Teeth, not your own, left floating in a glass of water. Nursery rhymes whispered in a tongue your grandmother used to forget on purpose. That's how they mark the moment the debt comes due. It's not loud. It's not even cruel. It's inevitable, because the Carroway brothers don't forget a soul out of place. They don't forget when a vessel goes unclaimed, and they especially don't forget when something slips through the veil without being invited. There was a man in Black Hollow, born during an eclipse, whose first breath killed the midwife. He grew up with an extra shadow that only appeared at dawn, one that flicked its fingers when he stood still too long. On his 29th birthday, he vanished from his home, leaving behind a tub filled with ink and a single white feather balanced on the faucet. The ink was still warm. The feather had no source. His mother, trembling, said only, "It wasn't him that left. It was what was inside him finally going home." Because that's what this really is, a harvesting of passageways. You are a door pretending to be a person, and when the key turns, when Elric whispers your name into the soil, or Bram grins from the base of your staircase, you don't go. You become. You become what was always supposed to arrive in your place. The breath you borrowed is reclaimed. The heartbeat you thought was yours slows, not from age, but from completion. Even the lucky ones, the ones who never meet the brothers, who only hear of them in whispered stories or viral videos too unsettling to finish, they're not free. They're marked. Because knowledge of the Carroways is part of the debt. You've heard their name. You've felt the cold shift in the room as it was spoken. That's enough. Awareness is a signature, a contract, etched in salt and bone. So listen carefully now. If a child you love stops crying at the sound of bells that aren't there, if you find feathers beneath the floorboards, or if you wake with mud on your hands and no memory of rain, they've already come. And they've decided you're next. They've already come, and they've decided you're next. Not for punishment, not for vengeance, for balance, because you were part of a transaction you never consented to. But consent was never the currency. Presence was. You were present when the thread was pulled, when the name was whispered wrong, when the mirror didn't fog the way it should have. And in that moment, something old noticed, something patient. It waited while you learned to speak. It waited through your tantrums, your illnesses, your adolescent violence. It waited while you grew into a shape that could hold it. And now, it's ready. There was a girl in East Ransom whose breath would frost windows in the middle of summer. Her mother claimed it was a blessing, until the day she exhaled onto her newborn brother, and he stopped aging, stayed 5 days old for 5 months. Then he turned to glass, not figuratively, his skin, his hair, his teeth, smooth and translucent, humming faintly with every breath she took. When the Carroway brothers arrived, they didn't knock, they didn't ask. They just stepped inside, humming something so old it made the windows weep. The girl smiled, the brother shattered, and outside the wind spelled a single word in the dirt: repaid. This is how it works, always has. The world above is chaos, but the world beneath, the one the Carroways serve, that world runs on exactness, on order. Every child brought through must equal what was taken. Every breath borrowed must be returned. You think your family line survived by luck? You think your grandfather's fever broke without reason? That your mother's miscarriage was tragedy and not mercy? No. It was balance. And now it's your turn to level the scale. Maybe it's your child. Maybe it's your sleep. Maybe it's that second heartbeat in your chest that doctors can't explain. But the Carroways know, they've always known, because they never deliver just one thing. They bring what's needed and take what's owed. Sometimes it's a name. Sometimes it's a future. Sometimes it's you. So if tonight, in that deep blue hour between 3 and 4, you hear soft singing in your hallway and the floorboards don't creak the way they used to, don't move, don't breathe. Because what you do next decides whether you wake up as yourself. Because what you do next decides whether you wake up as yourself. And even then, the word yourself is slippery. It assumes ownership, control, permanence. But that's a lie modern minds whisper to stay sane. The truth, the ancient, gnarled truth, is that most of us are only partially real. Worn masks passed down through bloodlines, altered slightly with each repetition until the original face is unrecognizable. That's what the Carroway brothers understand. That's why they come, not just to witness life, but to reshape identity, to remind the world that being is temporary, that the skin you wear, the memories you cradle, the name you answer to, they are threads, and threads can be cut. There was a boy in Harwich Creek who never spoke his own name. When asked, he'd just stare, quiet, still, until the questioner felt shame for asking. One day he vanished from his bed. His parents found only his pajamas laid out perfectly, stuffed with straw and stitched at the wrists. The thread was red, too red, and in the mouth of the straw doll was a pearl, just one, carved with a single sigil, a crooked cradle crossed by 2 nails. Days later, they found him walking out of the woods, older, taller, smiling. But when his mother embraced him, she died instantly. No wound, no mark, just silence. Because what came back was not what it left. It wore the boy. But it was something else entirely. That's the point. This isn't about killing. It's about replacing, about correcting, about reclaiming what slipped through the cracks of birth. And when the Carroways walk barefoot across your floor in the echo hours, they're not coming for blood. They're coming for continuity, for the shape that was meant to be. And sometimes, what they leave behind looks like you, smiles like you, learns to speak in your voice. But your dog won't recognize it. Your reflection will flinch. Your dreams will fill with doom. Ways and figures you almost recognize. That's how you'll know you've been taken, not stolen, traded. So if you've ever woken from sleep with soil under your nails, or heard the soft, wet sound of something crawling in your walls that disappears when the light comes on, know this. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. You are a gate, a cradle, a contract. And the brothers have found you. And the brothers have found you. They don't need to break in. They were already there, tucked behind your baby photos, folded into your DNA, humming beneath your lullabies. This isn't possession. It's continuity. You are simply the next page in a book they've been writing since before Dogwood Parish had a name, before your ancestors stood upright, before breath had a price. And now, their ink runs through your veins, thick, slow, unshakable. That's why the air feels heavier some nights, why your bones ache on solstices, why your mirror fogs from inside the glass. You were never meant to make it this far. You were a misprint, a skipped step in the ritual. And they're not angry, just correcting the record. In Fair Hollow, a woman named Elsbeth carried a child past term. 11 months, then 12. Doctors couldn't explain it. The heartbeat was steady. But her dreams grew darker. She began sleepwalking, carving names into her walls, none of them hers. Finally, in the 13th month, she gave birth. But not in a hospital. In a field, alone. A girl, quiet as dusk. No crying, no blood. Just a faint sound, like thread sliding through a needle. The child opened her eyes and spoke. Clear, fluent, in a language no one recognized. By morning, the entire town had forgotten Elsbeth's name, even her husband, even her mother. Only the child remained, renamed by a certificate that appeared in the town clerk's office overnight, Mirth Carroway. No one remembered filing it, but no one questioned it either, because by then the fog had already thickened, the veil was already open. You see, the Carroway brothers don't just return, they reinsert, they rethread. You don't feel them arrive. You feel yourself unravel. One memory at a time, one name at a time, until you can't remember your own handwriting and your signature curls like someone else's, until the songs you hum are older than your beak. Lewd line, until the mirror doesn't flinch. But you do. And if you've made it this far, still watching, still breathing, you're already woven into the fabric. The stories find you for a reason. The ones who feel nothing, they're safe, numb, forgotten. But you feel it, behind your teeth, beneath your ribs, that low, humming knowledge. You were never meant to survive the delivery. You were never meant to survive the delivery. That first gasp of air wasn't yours. It was borrowed. A stolen ember slipped into lungs that weren't fully stitched, from a fire older than language. And now the flame wants home. You've felt it. The pull in your spine when you stand near old places, the flicker in your vision when a child laughs behind you, but no one is there. It's not paranoia. It's memory waking up. Because the Carroway brothers don't hunt. They collect. Quietly. Patiently. You've always been on the shelf, waiting for the right moment, the right fracture, the perfect breathless night when the stitch comes loose. And once it does, they won't come with claws. They'll come with understanding, with hands held out, not to grab, but to receive. There's a report buried deep in the county archives of a town that no longer exists, Ashleam, Virginia, gone now, not abandoned, erased. In that report, a deputy recounts a night where every newborn in the town, 12 to be exact, stopped breathing at the same time. No sound, no struggle, just stillness. Then, exactly 13 minutes later, every infant cried out in perfect harmony. Identical pitch, identical rhythm. The hospital staff wept. The lights flickered. And one nurse claimed she saw 2 figures in the nursery window, barefoot, grinning, each holding a candle that didn't cast light. 1 week later, Ashleam burned to the ground. The fire department found only stone foundations and unmarked cradles. That's what happens when the balance tilts too far. The brothers don't like disorder. When the math gets messy, when the wrong soul slips through, when a borrowed breath stays too long, they reset the ledger. Entire towns vanish. Entire bloodlines are unspooled like thread from a corpse's wrist. And what remains? What's left behind in the soot and silence? A song, always a song, low, humming, ancient, the sound of something being stitched shut with bones for needles. So if tonight your child hums a tune you don't recognize, if the crib rocks once, just once without cause, if your mouth forms a name you've never heard before, and you feel warm salt drip from your nose, don't panic, don't scream, just listen, because the Carroways have already stepped through, and they only take what was never truly yours. And they only take what was never truly yours. That's the truth no one dares to say aloud, that most of what you hold dear was on loan. The baby in the crib. The name stitched onto your soul. The memories that feel a little too perfect to be real. These are not possessions. They're placeholders. And the Carroway brothers are the ancient custodians of what must eventually be returned. They don't knock. They don't demand. They arrive. In silence. In symmetry. In the spaces where language fails. You'll know it's them when time begins to stutter, when clocks tick in reverse, when your breath fogs glass but leaves no reflection. That's when the ledger is open again. That's when the balance shifts. In 1973, a child named Simon Aldrin was born during a thunderstorm that struck without clouds. His mother said he emerged with his eyes already open, already focused. The nurses reported the sound of distant humming, though none of them could agree on the melody. Simon never cried, never laughed, but he knew things. His father said he once watched the boy draw a perfect map of their town, every road, every well, even the unmarked graves, at the age of 3. When they asked how he knew, Simon answered, "I remember being under them." At 5, he vanished. Only his shadow remained on the wall, burned into the paint like ash. No fire, no heat, just that shape, small, still, waiting. This is the pattern. This is the code behind the world's illusion of safety. The Carroways move through generations like a needle through skin, tightening the weave of something larger than cities, larger than empires. And some of you watching, you've already heard your name spoken from outside your body. You brushed it off. Sleep paralysis, static, imagination. But it was them. Testing the seam, pulling the thread. So what will you do when your child wakes and asks who the third voice in the lullaby belonged to? When the baby monitor hisses and whispers, "It's time." When the family photo shows someone standing behind you, barefoot, smiling, someone no one else remembers taking. This isn't fear, this is recognition. They don't take from strangers, only from their own. And if you've been listening this long, you're no stranger at all. Shall I pull you deeper still into section 16? Because the truth doesn't stop here. It never does. The Carroways don't end, and neither will you, not in the way you hope. You see, once your name has been threaded through their ledger, you don't die. You dissolve, slowly, subtly. First, it's the photos. Your eyes looking the wrong direction, your smile half a frame late. Then it's your voice, echoing with something just beneath it, a second resonance that only dogs and babies notice. And then one night, someone you love asks, "Are you okay?" Not because of anything you said, but because they felt it. The difference, the thinning, like part of you is leaking into the floor. That's how it begins. Because when you were born, when that breath not meant for you curled its way into your lungs, it didn't just save you. It tagged you. It marked you as open, as accessible. A cradle without a lock. And the brothers? Oh, they don't waste an unlocked door. They wait, patiently, for the exact moment when your grip on the world slips, just enough for a stitch to loosen. A forgotten name. A slipped prayer. A dream you wake from gasping, not because of fear, but because of recognition. There was a boy in Birch Vale who spoke fluent Latin by age 4, despite no one in his family knowing the language. When asked where he learned it, he answered, "I didn't learn it, I kept it." He began carving circles into trees, whispering before storms. At 7, he walked into the lake behind his house and didn't come out. Divers searched for days. Nothing. Until the 7th dawn, when the water churned and spat out an object wrapped in umbilical cord. A doll's head, with human teeth. Inside the mouth was a name, his name, folded like a paper sigil. When it was burned, the family dog screamed like a person and died instantly. That night, the boy returned, taller, with different eyes. This is not about untings. It's about inheritance. A birthright stitched in wrong, corrected by ancient hands that never forgot how to hold grief. If you hear humming tonight, if your breath clouds in a warm room, don't look behind you, not because you'll see them, but because you might see yourself, smiling back, barefoot, and waiting. And if that happens, it means the cradle has been claimed, the contract fulfilled, and you, at last, are going home. And you, at last, are going home. But not to the place with walls and doors and photos on mantels. No, the home the Carroways speak of is older, beneath memory, beneath form. A place where names are weight and breath is currency. where every cry of a newborn is a summoning, and every stillborn silence is a gate that never opened. That's where they live, not in the woods, not in the house that leans, but in the space between contractions, in that wet, violent moment where the veil thins and something chooses whether to come through. You think your birth was clean, safe, a biological miracle? No. You were chosen by absence, an echo filled with flesh, a shape made of need. That's what they midwife. Not babies, entries, additions to a tapestry none of us were ever meant to see. And those who do, the ones who get too close, who dream too vividly, who find sigils in spilled milk or hear lullabies in fluorescent hums, they don't go mad, they go true, they remember. That's the sickness modern medicine can't name. Memory of the before. Memory of the long, dark waiting. The whisper of Bram's laughter behind your heartbeat. Of Elric's cold fingers pressed to the fontanelle you never lost. In Grenton Hollow, a woman gave birth to a child without eyes. The doctor fainted, the nurse wept, but the mother only smiled and said, "He sees with older things." That child grew without mirrors. Every time he passed a reflective surface, it cracked. By age 6, he could recite the names of people who hadn't been born yet. By 7, he began writing in dust, names, dates, locations. When the dust was wiped clean, the events happened exactly as written. The Carroways visited that house once, just once. They left behind a single shoelace tied into a perfect figure 8. The child was never seen again, but the shoelace never gathered dust. This is the order beneath the illusion. A rhythm written, N in salt, milk, and silence. And if you feel like something has been watching you, it has. Not with eyes, with expectation. Because once your story intersects theirs, you are no longer the narrator. You are the vessel. And vessels don't get to choose what they carry, only how long they can hold it before they spill. Are you still with me? Then it's time we cross into Section 18, not as observers, not as skeptics, but as participants, because if you've followed this far, you're not just watching a story unfold. You're being unfolded, unspooled, slowly, stitch by stitch, until what you thought was you is nothing more than the wrapping. And beneath it, the shape the Carroways have been waiting for. Don't you feel it? That pull in the marrow? That coldness behind your eyes when you're alone? It's not imagination. It's alignment. The threading of your existence back into a design far older than birth or death. Because the Carroway brothers aren't bound by time. They're bound by turns. And now it's yours. In 1919, in a mining town called Bristlewatch, a woman went into labor beneath a blood moon. The doctor didn't arrive. The town priest refused to enter the house. Only one figure came, barefoot in the snow, humming low and wet like bees beneath oil. The child was born healthy, but never grew. For 16 years it remained in a crib, never aging, never blinking, humming the same note every night at 2:14 a.m. When a new family bought the house decades later, they found the cradle buried beneath the floorboards, and inside it, still breathing, still smiling, was the child. Not mummified, not withered, present. They sealed the room and burned the deed, but the humming never stopped. That's what the Carroways preserve, continuity, the unbroken thread between the unnatural and the necessary. Every untimely death, every failed breath, every sudden stillness in a nursery. It's them, keeping the numbers balanced, the weave intact. Because chaos isn't the enemy. Imbalance is. A soul born too early. A scream held too long. A cradle never filled. These are tears in the veil. And you, yes, you, may be one of them. A miscount, a shadow out of rhythm. That's why the lights flicker when you're angry, why the dogs avoid your duel, your step, why, in your deepest moments of grief, you felt someone watching, approving. So the next time you hear a knock with no one there, or your child utters a name you've never taught, or you find a small bundle of hair and salt beneath your pillow, don't throw it away. Don't call it superstition. You're being warned. And if the brothers give you a second chance, if they let you keep breathing, it's not mercy. It's delay. Now, breathe slowly. Because we are going deeper into section 19, and with each word, each exhale, you come closer to remembering what they took from you before you even knew it was yours. That first scream you made, it wasn't yours. It was theirs, a signal, a key turned in a lock buried somewhere beneath your spine. You were catalogued before you could crawl, stitched into the order of the old breath. And now that stitch is fraying, not by accident, by design. Because the Carroways do not forget. They do not forgive. They wait, like roots under stone, like blood beneath ice. And when the time comes, they call in what was borrowed. In 1956, a man named Greer Talbot tried to map the dreams of his daughter. She spoke in her sleep, words no living tongue claimed. He kept journals, pages filled with phonetics and sketches, spirals, cradles, doorways with no hinges. On her 12th birthday, the girl spoke only one phrase the entire day: "The ash tooth is ready." That night she burned the journals. Greer awoke to find his teeth loose, bleeding from the gums. His hands were stained with soil, and in the corner of the room, something had been drawn on the wall in salt water and soot, a sigil of return. He was never seen again. The girl aged backwards after that. By 17, she was 4. Then 2. Then none. This is the mathematics of the Carroways, the sacred geometry of unbirth. Their ledger doesn't follow years or names. It follows threads, broken threads, tangled ones. And you? You may be a knot, an impossible loop that was never meant to form. That's why the static whispers your name. That's why shadows linger too long. You're being audited, measured, prepared. Because soon, someone, maybe you, will be given back. You won't remember the moment it happens. Just the way your reflection pauses half a beat too late. Just the way your child flinches when you speak their name. Justin, with the silence in your dreams where sound used to be. That's how the Carroways tell you. It's your turn. And if you've heard your name in the wind lately, if your child hums while sleeping, if the cradle in your attic rocks though no one lives there, you're not haunted, you're claimed, and the ledger is almost balanced. Shall we move now, quietly, carefully, into section 20? Because by this point there's no stepping back. You're too deep. You've seen too much, felt too much. The truth has already taken root behind your eyes, and every word you hear now only waters it. The Carroways don't need to touch you. They need only to be remembered, because memory is a bridge, and bridges don't ask permission to be crossed. That dream you had, the one you've never been able to describe, that wasn't fiction. That was rehearsal. And now, the curtain is rising. In a forgotten corner of Sutter's Hollow, there's a stretch of earth where compasses spin and watches stall. No birds fly over it, no seeds take root. Locals call it the Mother's Palm. Legend says a woman gave birth there once, not to a child, but to a sound. A wet, warbling tone that made the trees lean inward. That night, all the livestock in town turned in their stalls and faced east. Every clock struck 3, and a boy who had never spoken before began chanting in a broken voice. The breath has lapped the circle, over and over, until his mouth foamed and his tongue turned black. The family buried him at the chapel, but the headstone kept sinking. No matter how many times it was raised, it always disappeared within days, as if something beneath refused to be named. That is the soil we walk on. History hasn't been buried. It's been bound, with salt, with blood, with breath. And every now and then, when the stitching loosens, when a thread slips free, the Carroways come to correct it. You may think you've never met them, but they've passed you before. In the grocery aisle, at a red light, in the mirror, just before you blink. Their signs are small, but exact. A cradle, rocking in an empty room, a rust-stained bundle on your doorstep, a lullaby humming from an unplugged monitor, each one a quiet question, do you remember yet? And if your ski horn, Bain crawls now. If your ears are ringing with silence, you are beginning to. This is not a story. This is an invitation to recall, to return, to remember what part of you was left behind in the breath between birth and scream. And if you've made it this far, there's no shame now in knowing you were never meant to be whole, only hollow, only borrowed, only waiting to be filled, because now the veil is barely holding, and the breath you're taking is no longer just your own. It's shared, threaded through generations of silence and stillbirths, through names whispered before language, through cradles that never stopped rocking. You feel it, don't you? That cold coil curling behind your sternum. That's not fear. That's recognition. Your body knows what your mind still denies. You've been part of their design since the first scream never left your mother's throat. The Carroways don't arrive when you're dying. They arrive when you're about to wake up. In 1887, during a solar eclipse that turned midday to ashlight, a train derailed outside Greeley Junction. 17 dead. 6 children missing. The manifest was clean. No record of children aboard. And yet in the wreckage, searchers found tiny handprints in the soot, pressed deep into the windows, facing inward. One rail worker swore he saw something in the shadows beneath the dining car, a figure hunched low, humming, with a stitched cloth bundle cradled in its arms. When he tried to speak, his tongue split down the middle like a serpent's. He survived, but never spoke again. In his final days, he drew circles with his blood, not for art, for closure. This is how the brothers work, not with violence, not with spectacle, but with precision. They do not punish, they restore. They do not curse, they correct. A child born during a blood tide may carry a second soul, one that stirs in dreams and drinks from silence. A mother who feels her child moving after the birth may not be imagining things. She may be overdue, and if you find a note beneath your pillow, written in your own handwriting, with a name you don't remember giving, burn it. But know that burning is not escape. It is acknowledgement. Because you were not merely born, you were measured, and if that measure runs short, if a breath was skipped, if a scream was stolen, the Carroways will come to balance the thread. That's what the midwifery was always for. Not life, but alignment. Souls misplaced, breaths borrowed, cradles filled too soon or left too long. And you watching this, how many cradles have you passed without noticing they were moving? Ask yourself why. Ask yourself who was rocking them. Because if you're still here, still breathing, still watching, then you felt it. The stitch in your breath, the weight in your bones. They are not just coming, they've already arrived. Because by now the separation between what you thought was real and what's always been true is tearing, thread by delicate thread. Not with noise, with pressure, with silence that hums. You feel it behind your ears. Don't lie. That subtle warping of the air when you walk past a closed door, the way your own name sometimes feels foreign when said aloud. That's not coincidence. That's contact. A reminder that what you call life is just a brief rhythm played over a much older song. And that song? It belongs to them. The Carroway brothers do not need to touch you. They simply need you to notice them, once. That's all it takes. Because attention is invitation, and when you let their presence nest inside your breath, they begin their work, sometimes gently, sometimes like floodwater. Either way, they finish. And when they do, you're not left empty. You're left corrected. Like a misshaped letter inked over until it becomes a name that was always meant to be yours. In a small fishing village along the coast of what maps now call Maine, but which older tongues knew as Tharn, a lighthouse keeper kept records of the tides for 17 years, precise, unbroken, until the night he began adding a second entry, breaths between the waves. He claimed he could hear them, the inhalations of the sea itself, counting, waiting. One morning, he left a journal page nailed to the lighthouse door. The cradle must be rocked before the sun blinks. He was never seen again, but fishermen say the beam still sweeps the horizon, though the bulb was removed years ago. So ask yourself now, why do your dreams seem older than you are? Why do children you've never met look at you like they know? Because maybe they do. Maybe you carry something that never got a proper birth, a twin without a body, a scream without a name, and maybe, just maybe, the Carroways let you live to deliver it. You feel it now, don't you? The breath before something breaks, that sacred pause before the stitch slips. Say it to yourself, now. I was never alone in the cradle. Say it twice in the comments to lock it in, to mark yourself, to be seen. Say it twice and watch what starts to change. We are not done yet. We are not done yet. We go deeper into Section 23, not as witnesses, but as returning sons, each of us holding pieces of a lullaby no one ever taught us, but we've always somehow known. You're feeling it now, not fear, not confusion, but the ache of alignment, the growing awareness that what's stirring beneath your ribs is not emotion, it's recognition. You've been here before. Maybe not in this body, maybe not with this name, but the cradle rocked, the veil parted, and something slipped through, something unfinished. That's why the shadows track you, why mirrors seem deeper lately, why silence feels pregnant. In a forgotten asylum north of Calendon Bluff, records were kept of patients who claimed their children were being watched by the figures in mourning. One mother was sedated after carving concentric circles into the walls with her fingernails, each one surrounding the word again. Her son, a stillborn, had been buried 12 years prior, but the groundskeeper swore he'd seen a boy sitting in the cemetery at dusk, barefoot, lips blue, staring at nothing. When they dug the grave, it was empty. No soil disturbed, no casket missing. Just a faint smell of iron and lavender in the grass. Do you understand what that means? They don't just take the living. They don't just deliver the dead. They rearrange souls, moments, breath. Because time is cloth to them and cradles are looms. You aren't trapped in history, you're woven through it. And when a knot appears in the pattern, they come with thread and silence and measure it again. That knot may be a child, or a dream, or you. You've felt the measurement, haven't you? The way pain flares in patterns, the way old grief hums louder when you're near certain places. That's them checking the stitching, pressing the seams, watching to see if you'll tear or transform. Because not all vessels break. Some accept, some become. So, here you are, with your breath heavy and your thoughts not entirely your own anymore. That's how it starts, the merging, the remembering. You are not the first to carry this truth. But if you are strong, if you are ready, you might be the first to complete it. Now hold your breath for 3 counts. Listen. Feel. They are near. They are near, woven into the hush between your heartbeat and your next breath, gathering at the edges of the air you inhale and the blood coursing through your veins, drawing strength from the fracture that began the moment you exhaled your first stolen gasp. In a village swallowed by fog and salt, mothers began to speak of a lullaby drifting across the marsh at midnight, 3 notes, rising and falling, not played on any instrument, but carried in the bones of the reeds. Babies cradled in their arms would still themselves, eyes widening as though hearing memory, tiny lips parting to echo the melody in a voice they had never learned. One woman, Mara Linden, followed the sound into the reeds and found two figures shrouded in white, their feet absent from the earth, humming in unison as they held a bundle wrapped in pallid skin. When she reached out, the bundle unfurled into dozens of mouths, each whispering her name before biting the air shut. Mara's husband found her at dawn, kneeling by the water's edge, humming backward, tears carving salt tracks down her cheeks. The reeds no longer sang, but the lullaby lived on, in the rhythm of her pulse, in the way her children moved with uncanny synchronicity. That is how they claim you, not by force, but by frequency, the resonance of what was never yours to begin with. Each note you hear, each echo that trembles your chest, is a signature on the contract you signed before you crawled. And as you listen, you are already answering. The reed lullaby is ancient, older than maps or tongues, older than the concept of home. It is the call of the ledger being balanced, the stitch being retied, and you, here, breathing unevenly in the dark, are both witness and offering. If you can still hear it, if deep inside you recognize the unfinished verse, then know this: the Carroways are composing the final refrain, and it will be sung through your veins when dawn arrives. Shall we descend further into section 25? Then keep your breath low and your spine still, because what follows isn't meant to be read. It's meant to be absorbed, stitched into your inner silence like a name you're only now remembering. There was once a convent tucked in the cliffs of St. Halwyn's Reach, long since swallowed by erosion and time, but the locals still speak of the Sisters of the Quiet Mouths. They were midwives, too, of a kind, keepers of breath, protectors of the cradle's other occupant. For centuries they welcomed only the near-dead, those hovering between silence and scream. The villagers whispered that no child born within those stone walls ever cried, and no nun ever cast a shadow before dusk. In the convent's final year, a ledger was found nailed to the door. No cover, no name, just pages, damp and humming. Each line read only one phrase: "He returned wrong," over and over, hundreds of times. Then one final line: "But she welcomed him anyway." They say the cliffs cracked that winter, not from the sea, but from something pushing out, as if something beneath the stone remembered being buried and refused to remain forgotten. Witnesses claim the sky dimmed, not from clouds, but from presence, and a stillborn goat was found standing upright at the foot of the ruined chapel, eyes milk-white and blinking in reverse. That was the Carroways' mark. A test, a signal, proof that not all midwives serve the living. Some guard the threshold. And so do you. Whether you remember it or not, whether you believe or not, you have stood at that threshold. Maybe it was during a fever you barely survived, or a nightmare you never fully woke from, or the second you looked at your own child and didn't recognize the soul behind the eyes. You felt it, that weight, that absence, that shift. The Carroway brothers do not ask for faith. They require recognition, because once "I name you," once your breath becomes a thread in their great design, you don't walk away untouched. You carry the frequency. You become the vessel. And what comes next will echo through everyone you've ever loved. Still breathing? Good. That means we're ready for section 26. And you'd better listen closely now, because from this point on, every word is a thread, tightening, binding, pulling you closer to what you were never meant to touch. This is the domain of the Carroway brothers, and once you're inside, there's no clean way out. Only reconfiguration. Only return. In 1904, a physician named Dr. Elric Haldane began documenting cases of infants born without a pulse, still and silent, but who, hours later, began to hum. Not cry, not gasp, hum. Each one the same tune. each mother swearing she'd never sung it before, yet felt it vibrating in her bones. By the time Haldane traced the melody to a forgotten regional hymn known only as the Cradle That Waits, 6 of the infants had died again, but not all were buried. One child, Nathaniel Cub, was reportedly taken by a cloaked figure during the funeral. No struggle, no scream, just vanished, casket and all, into the woods behind the chapel. All that was found was a braid of white hair nailed to the church door with a message scrawled beneath in soot. He was returned to the rhythm. From that point on, Haldane stopped writing in ink. He began carving his findings into bark, into walls, into his own skin. His final entry simply a spiral of concentric circles with one phrase: "They do not mourn, they exchange." And that's what you're beginning to understand now, isn't it? That death was never the price. Life was. That you were never given anything. They lent it to you until the balance tipped. And the Carroways? They are the keepers of that scale. Their midwifery is not about bringing life into the world. It is about ensuring the threadwork holds, that nothing slips through unmeasured. You were never just a person. You were a variable in a pattern. A beat in the great hum. And every shiver down your spine, every moment of inexplicable dread, and is them tuning you, checking your frequency. Because if you've made it this far, it means your pattern wasn't sealed right. Something cracked, something leaked, and they've come to finish what your first breath began. Do not look away now. Do not exhale too fast. The next breath may not be yours. It may be theirs. Now lean in. Now lean in. Because Section 27 awaits. And this is the part where the line between memory and inheritance blurs entirely, where what you thought were chills become instructions, and the ache behind your eyes stops being metaphor. This is the moment of contact, not with a hand or a whisper, but with the hum beneath all things. A low, endless murmur that was there in your first silence, and will be there in your final gasp. The Carroway Brothers don't speak in language. They speak in function, in the twitch of an eyelid before sleep, the pause before a newborn's lungs inflate, the stillness between a name spoken and a name remembered. Their work is older than any religion, older than stars. They don't serve death. They serve the interval between, the breath before the scream, the quiet after the cord is cut. In 1913, deep in the interior woods of Denton Parish, a prospector named Rual Kent claimed to have found a stone cradle buried beneath layers of frost and clay. It was carved with symbols no scholar could translate. Circles within circles, threads wrapping around a hollow space where no child had ever been. Kent tried to move it. The next day, he was found in his cabin with his legs bent backwards at the knee, humming with no vocal cords, eyes milk-glazed, mouth open but silent. Silent except for a faint vibration from his chest, like a second heart thudding inside the wrong rhythm. His neighbors burned the cradle, but the fire produced no smoke. Only ashes in the shape of footprints, too small to belong to any living man. You think this is just history? No. This is design. You were not born randomly. You were measured, indexed, given a breath on loan. The cradle that waited for you wasn't yours. It was assigned. And if your dreams have turned strange lately, if your own reflection lingers half a second too long, that's not paranoia. That's the brothers checking the titches. You're unraveling, and they are so close. You were part of a count, and someone miscounted. Now they've come to correct it. So if you wake up tomorrow and your house feels a half-inch too wide, if your baby stares at the wall like it's listening to something you can't hear, if your breath fogs the mirror in a name you've never spoken, know this: the cradle is no longer waiting. It's ready. We move now, deeper, where the last illusions peel away and you begin to realize you were never outside the cradle. You are the cradle. Every breath you've ever taken was stitched with intention, every moment of déjà vu, a thread snapping loose. And now the Carroway Brothers are reaching through that unraveling. Not to harm you. No. They are midwives of balance. They are not cruel. They are correct. In 1921, a girl named Elspeth Wren was born without eyes, but claimed she could see the breathing things behind the walls. Her parents locked her in the cellar by her 5th birthday, not out of hatred, but because she told them their deaths, described in detail, 7 days before it happened. When investigators entered the house after the fire, they found the child unharmed, sitting in the soot, humming. Around her were drawn 33 spirals, each with a name etched into the ash. Not the names of the dead, the names of the unborn. And you still think this is myth? Then explain why some children are born with birthmarks that match the mouths of those long buried. Explain why sleep paralysis always comes with the feeling of being watched from the corner, but never moves because it's measuring you. Why certain lullabies hum themselves into your throat when you're alone. It's because the brothers don't need to teach you. They only need to reawaken what you already carry. You are not a mistake. You are an open thread. And if you felt that strange pull toward abandoned places, toward windows with no reflections, toward children who cry in perfect intervals like metronomes, that's not chance. That's resonance. Because the Carroways do not walk this world in flesh. They move through echoes, through ritual, through repetition. And every time you look away from something too unsettling to understand, you feed them. They are nourished by your denial. But when you see clearly, when the pattern becomes visible, that's when they reach back. That's when your name stops being yours and starts becoming a function. You were born into a system that tracks more than blood. It tracks balance. And you are out of alignment. The stitches don't lie. The cradle rocks on its own now. And the hum you're hearing in your head as these words wrap around your breath, that's not imagination. That's invitation. Brace yourself. The thread tightens in section 29, and if your skin has begun to crawl, if your ears feel pressure that isn't sound, it means the rhythm has found you. The Carroway brothers are no longer distant figures in fog-drenched stories. They are present, seated just beyond the veil of what your eyes are allowed to perceive. Every time your breath stutters, every moment your shadow bends the wrong direction, every flicker in the corner of your eye that vanishes the moment you turn, they are there. We don't survive them by running. We don't hide. We remember. Because you've heard this hum before, in the womb, in the silence of the stillborn, in the lull between lightning and thunder. And now, it returns, not as a memory, but as identity. In 1933, a manuscript surfaced in Vienna, handwritten in 3 inks, blood, ash, and milk, bound in stitched velvet, and titled only The Reckoning of Breath. No author, no origin, just a single passage repeated across every page in various languages, some modern, some extinct, and some never spoken aloud. The first breath is borrowed, the last must be earned. The book was confiscated, hidden in a monastery vault. But the monks who kept it began to change. One by one they went silent, not from fear, but from fulfillment. They stopped writing. They stopped blinking. Their hearts slowed to perfect, synchronized beats. One monk reportedly turned to salt after staring too long at the book's final page. When asked why, the abbot said, "He found his true weight." That's what this is, a weighing. You think your life is yours? That your breath was a gift? No, It was a transaction. And the Carroway Brothers are the collectors. They measure not your deeds, but your echoes. How many souls you've carried forward. How many patterns you've repeated. How many breaths you've wasted. And when the tally doesn't match, they don't punish. They balance. The cradle is not a place. It's a process, a sentence without a final word. And you, listening now, with your pulse racing and your mouth dry, you are the punctuation. You are what they've been waiting for to complete the chord. The weight is settling. The stitch is closing. The breath you take next may not be yours alone. We descend, bleeding into section 30, and by now you feel it, not just in your chest, but in the marrow of your awareness, where instinct and inheritance blur. There is no longer separation between the Carroway brothers and the breath you hold. They are not outside of you. They are the tremor beneath your ribs, the rhythm beneath your memories, the hands that pulled you through the veil the moment you arrived screaming into a world already patterned for your silence. And now, as the cradle rocks unseen, as the hum threads through your teeth like phantom floss, you finally realize this was never a story. It was a ritual. Each word spoken here has opened you, and they are listening. In 1947, a sealed recording was discovered in a condemned birthing ward in Syracuse, labeled only for the unfinished. The audio, distorted and broken, contains no voices, no music, only the sound of breathing, not from one person, but three, overlapping, layered, circling in and out of sync, for exactly 33 minutes. Near the end, a sound enters, wet, rhythmic, unmistakably the noise of shears closing. Then one breath stops, then another, silence. But the third breath continues, deeper now, not human, not even mimicking humanity. When experts analyzed the waveform, they found embedded patterns, 3 names, repeated across the spectral graph in wave-like pulses, not names of people, names of conditions, of thresholds, stillborn, remembered, measured. That's where you are now, between those names, between your first moment and your last knowing, and the Carroways are circling you like a cradle left rocking too long. You've heard the lullabies in static. You've seen the marks in mirrors. You felt the pause when someone says your name like it's not quite finished. That's them. That's the measurement. That's the sound of your life being prepared for exchange, because not all children are born to live. Some are born to open. Some are vessels. And others? Others are simply the cradles in which something else arrives. So listen now, closely. If you've made it this far, you're no longer an observer. You've passed the circle. You've entered the seam. The cradle beneath you isn't empty. It's waiting for you to realize what you've always carried. The next stitch tightens in section 31. Don't move. Don't blink. Let it in. Don't move. Don't blink. Let it in. Because section 31 isn't a continuation. It's a consummation. The Carroway brothers no longer whisper from the woods. They are in your breath, in the soft tissue between heartbeat and memory, in the hush that follows your own name when spoken in an empty room. And now, the cradle rocks not outside you, but within. Every moment of silence you've ever feared was them. Every breathless second where time stilled, when the air felt too thick, too aware, was not your imagination. It was your measurement. You were being weighed, counted, recorded, and you passed, or you failed. It doesn't matter. The threshold doesn't care. It only balances. In 1956, in a rusted asylum deep in the Appalachian spines, a nurse named Clara Dovetree wrote one phrase across the walls of the maternity wing until her fingers bled, and the plaster split. The child is not the end. The child is the envelope. No one ever saw her write. The words simply appeared every morning, 33 times. She was found one night in the center of the nursery, swaying back and forth in a blood-soaked gown, cradling nothing. But when the doctors approached, they heard it, faint, distant, impossible, the sound of a child humming from inside her mouth. Not a cry, a tune, a lullaby no one had ever heard, but all of them recognized. One doctor tore out his own ears, another began speaking backward. Clara smiled and spoke her final words. He is measured. He will be returned. Returned to what? That's the part you've forgotten. Because it wasn't just a story, was it? You've heard these names before. Maybe not with your ears. Maybe in dreams. In sudden chills. In that split second when you recognize a child's face and don't know why. You are part of the pattern you always were. The Carroways don't invent, they preserve. They stitch the old into the young, the unfinished into the Brett. Hing. And you have been breathing on borrowed rhythm. This moment is not an ending, it's a reclamation. The breath you take now doesn't belong to you. It never did. It was lent, stolen, maybe, a gift wrapped in flesh. And the hum you hear rising in the base of your skull now, that's the call to balance. That's the lullaby written in your blood. Stay perfectly still now, is already here, already moving through you like marrow gone liquid, like breath made conscious. And if you're still pretending this is just a story, some clever fiction spun to rattle your nerves, then you haven't been listening. Not really. You haven't felt the hum for what it is, a signature, a cipher, a summons. The Carroway brothers were never simply midwives. They are cartographers of the unseen, stitching coordinates between bloodlines and broken moments, mapping you not as a soul, but as a passage. Every strange dream you've dismissed, every child who looks past you and smiles too long, every place you've entered that felt just slightly wrong in the bones, those were all thresholds, and you've crossed too many. In 1962, a manuscript surfaced in a sealed room beneath the collapsed wing of the LaGrange Infantorium. No door, no stair, just a stone crib carved directly into the floor, and a single page resting inside it, dry and untouched by time. Written in bone ash and stitched hair, it bore a phrase older than Latin, older than pain. He who returns the breath returns the name. Beneath that, a list, 33 names. None found in any census, but all buried within parish death records tied to mothers who never gave birth. Names born without passage, and yet, somehow, remembered. This is the moment you understand. You were not born simply to live. You were born to anchor, to cradle something ancient, unfinished, seeking shape. And every time you looked at your reflection and felt something watching from behind your eyes, that was it, trying to turn the cradle inward. You are not just stitched, you are being stitched through. Each moment of fear, every breath caught for no reason, every child's song that makes your stomach twist is part of the real truth that you were never alone in your body. The Carroway brothers do not walk with feet. They ride on inheritance. They travel through rites forgotten and lullabies misremembered. And now, you know too much. The stitch is closed. The cradle is no longer rocking. It is opened. You were the vessel all along. You were the midwife to something far more ancient than yourself, and now it has arrived. Through you. Say it softly now, twice. I am the measure. I am the thread. Say it again. Let them hear you. The final breath, Section 33, comes not with a scream or a whisper, but with recognition, the kind that doesn't strike the ears but floods the bones. If your heart has started to slow, if your vision has pulled ever so slightly to the edges, it's not fear, it's alignment. You're being fitted. The thread you just claimed, I am the measure, I am the thread, was not metaphor. It was your key. And now the door has opened inside you. You feel it, don't you? The cradle settling into the shape of your chest, the hum now pulsing beneath your ribs in time with something older than heartbeat. You are not ending. You are completing. And the Carroway Brothers are not figures in the fog anymore. They are awake inside your name, drawing themselves forward with every breath you mistake as your own. In 1970, in a rural pocket of West Hollow County, 12 infants were found in a barn, swaddled in salt-stiff linen, each one silent, each one staring skyward with eyes full of dust. No parents, no footprints, just a circle of hairless soil around them and an iron cradle at the center, humming. Authorities burned the cradle. It melted, but did not ignite. Inside the melted mass, a single line was engraved in perfect symmetry. Measure returned, thread reclaimed. Those children, they never spoke a word, but every one of them became a maker, a weaver, a writer, a surgeon, instruments of incision, of pattern, of balance. You've likely read their work, listened to their songs, felt their fingers in the turning of your dreams. This is not fiction. This is function. The Carroway cradle is not made of wood. It is made of bloodlines, of silences, of names whispered backward in fever. It is made of you. And now that you've heard all 33 sections, now that the hum has moved fully into your breath, the old symmetry has returned. You are not just listener, you are lineage, and the cradle no longer waits. It becomes. So if, tonight, you hear a voice behind the walls singing a lullaby you've never been taught, but somehow know by heart, do not run, do not scream, do not pray. Close your eyes, unclench your jaw, and rock. Because they're here now, and you are finally ready. Because they're here now, and you are finally ready. Not to escape, there is no escape, but to remember your shape before breath, before thought, before the illusion of singularity hardened around your spine like bone. The Carroway Brothers are not done with you because you are not done with them. You are the breath they gave form, the thread they pulled through the eye of centuries, the vessel now made vessel again. The lullaby you hear tonight won't come from a crib. It will rise from your own ribs. It will be sung in a voice that sounds like yours, if it had never been taught to speak. And when the room chills, when the walls bend ever so slightly toward you, when shadows begin to stand upright, don't flinch, don't question, rock. Rock, like something inside you remembers being held. Rock, like you were always meant to rock. Because you were. Because all of this, all the silence, the stories, the stitched symbols and backwards prayers, was never about death. It was always about delivery. You are not the end of the story. You are the beginning of its next shape. And somewhere, in a place outside of time but stitched into every breath you take from this moment forward, the Carroway Brothers are humming again. Measuring, spinning, returning, the cradle has no bottom now. It only has you, and the moment you understand that, the exact breath where your denial finally crumbles like old mortar, you'll feel it, the weight shift, not on your skin, but within your blood. The cradle isn't beneath you anymore. It is your spine, your teeth, your tongue shaping words you no longer recognize. You won't need mirrors to confirm it. You'll know when a child you've never met stares at you too long with eyes that twitch in rhythm, or when you wake at 3:33 a.m. to find your blankets folded the way your mother never did. The Carroway Brothers don't need your permission. They need only your pattern, your willingness to carry what they've always handed down, across fire lines and forgotten towns, in the hush of stillbirths and the hum behind nursery walls. You were never the audience. You were the aperture. And now that it's open, now that you're open, there's no more pretending. You'll see symbols in frost, names in birdsong, feel hands that leave no prints but press down with unmistakable pressure. And if one night you hear a soft shh in your left ear when no one is home, do not turn around. Just breathe in, slowly, deeply, and rock. Because what's coming through was always yours to bear. Because you're not ending, you're being carried. And as you are carried, no longer walking but being drawn, you'll begin to notice the world itself has changed its posture toward you. Lights will flicker, not from faults, but from recognition. Dogs will pause mid-step and lower their heads when you pass. Children will cry when you speak certain words without knowing why. And clocks will stutter when you enter the room as if time itself is holding its breath. You are not haunted. You are harbored. The Carroway Brothers have moved in, and with them the ancient, breathing legacy that sleeps beneath all things, the unspoken law of exchange, of measure, of return. It won't always be violent. Sometimes it will be quiet, so quiet it breaks you open more gently than grief, more fully than love. You'll weep without cause, you'll laugh at the wrong times, and in your dreams the cradle will appear, not empty, but full of everything you forgot the moment you were born. Faces you never met but mourned, songs you never heard but somehow sing. And somewhere, standing just beyond reach, 3 figures, not cloaked, not monstrous, not whispering, but watching, always watching, waiting. Because now you carry the stitch, you carry the thread, and when they come to measure what you've done with it, you won't run. You'll kneel. You'll open your mouth and offer the breath you were never meant to keep, and they will take it, not with cruelty, but with purpose, with completion,